So hello and welcome to the third onboarding webinar for our 2020 T-level providers. If you haven't already done so, please pop something in the chat box to let me know you can hear me okay. This session will be interactive. We'll be using polls, the chat box and breakout rooms to involve you and allow you to share your ideas and learn from each other's experiences. Also, the session is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel in the coming days. We also welcome questions from participants, so please add any questions or queries you think of into the chat box for us. So I'm Helen Scanlon and I'm one of NCFE's curriculum officers for T-levels. My role is to support our centres in relation to the teaching and learning of our qualifications. Amongst other roles, I've been a vocational teacher, I'm an English and Maths specialist, and I've worked in teacher education and quality improvement in a large FE college. I've been involved in teacher CPD and Ofsted inspections, and I'm passionate about high-level teaching, learning and assessment practice. I'm also joined today by Janet King, the Subject Specialist for Education and Childcare. Hiya, Janet.
Hi Helen, hi everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, you can see the objectives of the session on the screen now. We will cover tags briefly today and provide some guidance regarding where you'll find the relevant information and support for them. The session is reliant on your input, so please be ready to share your experiences and ask questions as we progress through this afternoon's webinar. Okay, so we're going to start with the first poll, and I'm going to ask you to let me know what has been the main challenge for teaching and learning in the first year of your T-level delivery. If your preferred option is missing from the poll choices, please choose the most appropriate and add your ideas into the chat box. Okay, so I've launched that first poll. The options are the industry placement, teaching and learning online and the COVID restrictions, delivery covering the full depth and breadth of the TQ, assessment, formative and planning for summative, and anything other that you would put into the chat box. So thank you. I can see people are starting to vote. Thanks for that. I'll just leave that poll open for a little bit longer and then I'll share the results. Okay, I'm going to close that poll now. Thank you. Just share. So you can see we've got a bit of a split between the teaching and learning online, the delivery and the assessment. Nobody said the industry placement, so that's brilliant. Thank you. And nobody said other, but if you do think of any others, please share them. Just let us know. Okay, we're going to start off with a review of the first year. In this section, I'm firstly going to ask you to consider the most important thing you've learned in relation to delivering the education and childcare TQ. What do you wish you'd known about delivering the core elements, for example? So please put into the chat box, what's the most important thing you've learned in teaching the T-level in the first year? Just going to leave that open just for a few seconds before I put the second question up. So what have you learned in the first year of delivery of T-levels? I'm also going to ask you to make this as positive as you're able to. Put aside the challenges the pandemic has brought and focus on delivery and assessment of the core components of the qual. Put your ideas in the chat box and we'll collate everyone's ideas and share them with you all after the event. We've got some answers coming in, so getting to grips with the breadth of the elements. Yes, so there's been quite a lot of additions and there's a lot of breadth and depth in the core, isn't there? So there is that. We've also had the main content isn't too far away from existing level 3. That's good. Excellent. So if you're used to doing level 3 already, it's not too different. That's great. Okay, the second question is going to appear on the screen now then. What would you tell yourself a year ago about teaching, learning and assessment of the education and childcare T-level? So if you could go back in time before September last year, consider what you'd tell yourself about the teaching, learning and assessment of this new qualification. What did you wish you'd known that you know now at the end, nearing the end of year 1? Oh, I've got some excellent answers coming in. So yes, staying calm and getting easier. It is a bit daunting, isn't it, when it's a new qualification? And it could be quite daunting when you look at a new qualification spec and where you've got to plan everything in and make sure everything's delivered, etc., etc. Just going to read through some more of the ideas that are coming in. And this is a brilliant one. To be confident in your own subject knowledge, absolutely. You know that related to that other point made earlier, you know level 3, you know the subject area. It hasn't changed just because we've got a new qualification, so excellent. And the students are, you find they've been resilient and they can cope. They won't know any differently. So yes, that's an excellent idea. So thanks for that. If you think of any other things, as I say, please just pop them into that chat box. Okay, I'm going to start off with sharing my observations from the support work I've been doing with centres during this first year. You might recognise some of the points I make, as they are a collection of my understanding of the challenges and strategies you have shared with me in your onboarding activities, CPD sessions and consultation meetings. They might also help you to answer the question I set on that previous slide by reminding you of the great work you've been doing. Okay, so the first and most important point I'd like to make is that the very high quality provision that I've been told about. The new qualification has a raised prestigious status across the country, and the impact of this on both teachers and students appears to have elevated the standards and expectations of everyone involved. I've been so impressed with the work teachers and assessors have been doing, and this has had a very positive impact on the students' learning experiences and of course their attitudes as well. I've heard about so much innovative practice for face-to-face and remote learning. Teachers have used a wide range of techniques to engage their students and assess their progress. So the use of formative assessment has been and will be vital. We would encourage everyone to plan a range of formative assessment activities and use them to motivate your students to be the best that they can be. Tracking and recording of this activity is also really important. Moving on to industry placements, and what a challenge you've all had in the first year. The relaxation in hours for the early years educator helped, but we know how important work experience is for students, not just to consolidate their theoretical learning, but also to develop the competencies they need to work in the industry. I'd like to take this opportunity to reassure you that there is still time for this to happen. As the country returns to some kind of normal, employers are going to be more willing to take students and be part of their future workforce development. We plan to have CPD sessions in June to look specifically at planning for year 2. And after year 1, we're coming to an end of. The industry placement is going to be extremely important. We've also delivered a CPD session related to preparing for management placements at the end of March. So if you think you'll find this useful, please see the recordings of it on our YouTube channel. We've all developed our remote learning competencies. And although the best teaching normally takes place in person, there's been some amazing work done remotely. I believe that this development of teacher skills will be essential going forward, with centres using more online learning activities as they have shown to be beneficial and effective in continuing learning whilst managing the pandemic. They should also make a positive contribution to teachers' CVs and areas of competencies. Providers across the country have been willing to share their ideas and resources. We're planning facilitation of a more formal provider network in the future. So in year 2, this will be structured and we will support the sharing of ideas further. Moving on to preparing for the new summative assessment methods. So CPD sessions have taken place and draft resources have been shared with centres to support teachers and of course their students. Teachers have been able to understand the requirements of the exams and the ESP. Although we're waiting for the final guidance, I'm confident that the professional attitude we've witnessed and approach centres are using will ensure the best outcome for students. We will talk about this and the tags in more detail shortly. Then we've got initial advice and guidance and entry requirements. They've been really important to ensure that the recruitment of the students on your T-level programmes has been accurate and successful. Consider lessons learned from year 1 recruitment and entry requirements and apply them to your year 2 cohorts. Although there are no suggested or formal entry requirements, where centres have set more challenging expectations for their T-levels, the students appear to be managing better and having more success. Something to consider if you haven't already. Which takes us to the lessons learned and the importance of using them to inform ongoing and future planning. how much detail to include in teaching and learning, CPD, and for teaching and assessing staff for new content or hard to teach areas, how to get the best out of the available resources and using external resources such as the knowledge organisers and the mapping documents. HODA has now publication dates for the textbooks, and these are now available for pre-order via their website. Janice, is there anything else in particular subject specialist-wise you'd like to share?
Thank you, Helen. In terms of lessons learned, I think you've covered most of those things, and I think, well, what a year it's been. You know, it's been an extraordinary year for everyone, and education has been impacted so much. I think I know somebody put in the chat about resilience, and I think that these students are probably the most resilient students we've ever had, in terms of, you know, the adaptability and the flexibility and continuing to feel motivated and to keep going, which is amazing. And we've had problems with placements, which we know about. We've had to deal with the problems and any individual circumstances around remote learning. It's been a really challenging year, but I think we've all sort of learned a lot from it as well. If we can take any positives from it and any lessons that learned from that angle, it's about, I think, you know, staying focused, making sure that we do feel confident in what we're doing, and that the students are being well led, and they're actually, you know, able to access the resources that they need to be able to, you know, contribute and engage with the curriculum. This is the most important thing, and I think teachers and students this year they are the most resilient, or one of the most resilient groups of people that I've ever come across. So my hat goes off, and I think things will begin to settle. It's difficult because we were hoping, you know, to be able to look back at year one as a true pilot, if you like, with exams and assessments and so on. It's not going to be the case, is it? Let's be honest. It's not going to be the case. We're looking at teacher assessed grades and things like that. So all of these things continue to sort of add to the complexities of it. But regardless of that, students have been learning. The feedback that we've got from students and from centres, Helen, that you've just mentioned, is absolutely testament to that fact that students are engaged, students are doing well, and students are progressing through this learning experience. So I would say lessons learned is congratulations to all the achievements that you've done in a very difficult, challenging year. Yeah, well done for that, and onwards and upwards, as they say.
Absolutely, Janet, thank you. And here, I'm totally with you there. Excellent practice, really good teaching and learning, and building resilience is going to do everybody, every student, the world of good moving forward. So thank you. Okay, so moving on to the new assessment strategies. For this area, we will talk about tags, but also moving on to the occupational specialism planning for next year. I'll also take the opportunity to remind you to ask us questions. If we're unable to answer them today, we will follow them up with our NCFA colleagues and ask them on your behalf. So please continue to put any questions or comments, queries, anything at all into the chat box as they come into your mind. So what we've learned so far. So for exam prep, it's been a challenge. Students who have centre assessed grades for their GCSEs have limited experience in revision strategies. Centre staff have worked really hard to prepare their students for the exams, and this input and skills development will be useful to the students in their future learning too. So even if the exams aren't taking place this year, exam prep and revision prep will still help your students for the future. For the Employer Sept project, the importance of applying learning to context has been the appropriate focus of teaching and learning. Staff are used to the holistic approach to assessment, and it appears that the main lesson learned here relates to the new or extended core content. The broad range of knowledge and understanding required for success in the ESP has been a challenge, but staff have understood why this has been included into the TQ. Again, the breadth and depth of learning will help the students to progress and continue their learning and become more employable. Which takes us to teacher assessed grades. Each centre will be required to produce a tag strategy, and this should be applied and used once it's been verified by the NCFE quality team. Some of the important points to note in relation to teaching and learning include: please continue to teach the core content for as long as possible. Ensure coverage of as much of the curriculum as possible in the remaining time you have. To guide any assessment decisions, advice from a curriculum perspective would be to look at the evidence of students' knowledge and understanding collected so far for each T-level student. Consider how the evidence was collected and the context or conditions related to it. Was it in class, at home, with or without support? How representative is each piece of evidence of the level of the individual student's knowledge and understanding? Also then identify the gaps in evidence for each student. NCFE resources, so a number of new resources are being produced to support you in your tag systems. There'll be examples of topic tests, additional assessment resources and guidance is being produced, and although we strongly recommend that you use these new resources, they're not mandatory. There are also adaptations for the conditions for the Employer Sept project, so look on the COVID section of the website for advice, guidance and the documents that are being produced and provided to support you. If required, devise assessment activities to allow you to accurately and confidently assess any missing core areas and elements that you have delivered. Use the collected evidence to make a judgment on existing knowledge and understanding. And remember, this should not be a prediction of future levels. The quality team will be offering further support webinar at the beginning of May, where there'll be the opportunity to ask questions. Please refer to the COVID-19 page of the website for the most up-to-date information and resources. The link to this is also on the screen now. And please also talk to your account manager or external quality assurer about key dates, etc. So as I say, as well, if you have any questions about anything we've said so far or about the tag process, please pop them into the chat box. Okay, we're going to be running some CPD sessions in June to support your planning for the delivery of the occupational specialisms. But I'm now going to ask Janet to give us some headline pointers to have in mind to help you get started and to guide your planning.
Thanks, Helen. I think one of the most important things to remember is that breadth. We've talked about the breadth of and wealth of information that's involved in the core, and those 12 elements that will have already been touched upon in that sort of core year. That's the breadth. And now in this depth, in this occupational specialism, this is where that deeper dive is occurring. So there'll be lots of things that are anchored to that core teaching and that core delivery. So when you're thinking about the planning, and there are some schemes of work for each of the performance outcomes, 1 to 5 for the early years educator and 1 to 4 for assisting teaching. Take a look at those by all means, but also bear in mind that actually where's the crossover between what's gone on in the core in terms of curricula, in terms of legislation, in terms of pedagogy, in terms of theory. What are the core common areas that cross over? And it will give you a really good sort of starting point for picking things up in that occupational specialism sort of a second year, if you like. So if it was me, I'd be looking at those schemes of work, I'd be reflecting on what's gone on in the core and finding that correlation in terms of the breadth and now where we're going to in the depth, so that you can pick up teaching and learning anchored to that breadth in that core year, reflecting upon that, giving some context to what you're going to go into that deeper dive. And yes, there's going to be some crossover, but what it is, it's not to some elements, you know, there may be, or to some performance outcomes rather, there's going to be some perhaps revision of the same thing, reflecting on the same type of information. But in the majority, this will be a more contextualized, deeper dive, but it will be anchored to a lot of the learning that's taken place in the theory side of the core elements, and also now bringing together that coherence between theory and practice that really helps to make that practitioner and that professional who's working with children and young people at the end of the day. So bringing it all together. That would be my advice. And of course, you'll have the textbook as well to help and guide.
Lovely, thanks for that, Janet. And as I said, we're going to be covering this in more detail in the June CPD session. So also questions, still keep them coming in the chat box, please. So we've shared our lessons learned. Then we'd like to offer you the opportunity for you to do the same. So we're going to go into breakout rooms, and this is where the automatic stop recording of the session will happen. So we'll just move into the breakout rooms and have that discussion. Okay, thanks for that. There was a lot of good discussion going on there. And I'll just do a quick recap. We've talked about going forward and the tag process and situation. It'd be really good if you could be involved in producing your centre tag assessment strategy document, so that you know exactly what's expected and you know what's coming and what to do to prepare for it. And also getting there's going to be more samples becoming available this week in relation to employer set projects, topic tests, etc. So there'll be lots of new sample assessment resources that you can look at, review and use if you think that they're useful. But as I say, they're not mandatory. It's really handy to know that when we are getting another employer set project sample, one each for early years and assistant teaching. So, and there will be some adaptations to the conditions of delivering the ESP, which will make life much easier for the people who are facilitating them. So watch the space. By the end of the week, we'll have all sorts of lovely new things. So brilliant, thanks for that. Okay, then moving on to planning. For the next few months, it's probably going to be very focused on getting as much teaching of the core content completed to support the tag decisions that are going to be made. Each centre has the opportunity for their third curriculum consultation with me, so please use these to support staff to complete the tag process if required. Placements should be opening up to the students now, so it might be useful to use the coming months to access some placement hours with a view to making the most of summer provision to make up for any lost time due to the restrictions. And for next year, if needed, please remember the opportunity for the resits in the autumn term. We'll be sharing the dates in the summer once they've been verified by the Institute. Remember the CPD session in June to support planning for the occupational specialism input. We're also delivering more CPD sessions, which you can see on the slide on your screen now. There'll also be an offer of sessions for the Wave 2 providers starting their delivery in September this year. So if Wave 1 centres have any new staff starting, they could access the developed versions of the sessions we've already delivered to you guys in Wave 1. Please talk to me or your account exec if this would be useful. So if you have any members of the team leaving and new members of the team starting, they haven't necessarily missed out on all of the CPD we've done already. They can access all the CPD we do and they could join the Wave 2 providers. Janet, for moving forward, is there anything that I've missed?
I don't think so, Helen. I think everything's there in terms of the support available, what's coming next, and just the fact that there's always somebody here to take whatever questions you have about anything really in terms of the T-level. So yeah, great.
Brilliant, lovely, thank you. Okay, I'm going to get some feedback in relation to how prepared you feel in relation to producing the teacher assessed grades for the core components of the TQ. So for poll 2, it's how confident are you in relation to identifying tags for the T-level core components. I'm just going to launch this poll. So the choices are you extremely confident, very confident, quite confident, or not very confident? Please choose whichever one fits you best. Lovely, I'll just give a few more seconds and I'll close it. So we've got a good mix again. I'll just share the results. As you can see, we've got an even split between extremely, very and quite. And we've got nobody and not very, so that's wonderful. That just makes my heart sing. So thanks for that. As I suggested earlier, any centres who would like guidance can cover this with me in a one-to-one curriculum consultation. Okay, that poll doesn't seem to want to leave the screen at the moment. I don't know why it's not letting me close it. No, it's not letting me share that at all. So I'm just going to pause the screen a second and try and get the
Okay.
Okay then. For further advice, we're going to share some ideas. At this point, I'd like to remind you to complete the evaluation form you've got access to when you log out of the webinar. We like to ensure that our input and support is relevant and relates to what you need. So please add your ideas for further support for CPD sessions there. We'll also be finalising our support and CPD offer for year 2 over the summer. So we would really appreciate your input in relation to your staff ongoing development needs. So on the screen now, you'll see the link to the HODA website. If they click and catch up, there we go, for the textbook and resources. And as I say, you can now pre-order those textbooks through there. There's the NCFE website for further tag guidance. There's the booking page for the CPD sessions I've mentioned earlier, and of course Qual Hub for the materials and resources. Please be aware that the resources section is updated regularly. So if you haven't logged into it for a while, it's a reminder for you to check what's there now, because there are new resources there all the time. So it would be now to do question and answer. I think we've answered all of them, and we've got no more coming through in the chat box, but if you do have any more, please pop them in. So the only thing we've got left to do now is to thank you for your attendance and your input, and please stay safe and keep in touch with us. Janet, do you want to say anything before we finish?
Just to say thank you very much for those people who joined us on the webinar today. It's absolutely appreciated. Thank you.
Very much so. We couldn't do this without you guys. So thanks so much for your time, and until next time, goodbye.